Barbie, you're beautiful. You make me blue.
Hello folks, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the first video that I'm putting on it, and it's going to be short, but let me introduce myself as a vintage Barbie collector living in Canada, Toronto specifically. I've been collecting vintage since 1988. Yes, that's a long time, and I've sold my collection once. Well, most of it, and what I was left with were the remnants of it, and from those remainders, I decided to rebuild my collection. What I'm intending on doing is posting videos, each documenting a year of Barbie fashions from 1959 to 1969. Those were always the parameters that I had for my own collection. And then I'll go back and look at Ken, Skipper, Francie fashions from the same period. Over the years, I've amassed a large collection of items that were only available on the North American market. So those of you that are looking for Japanese exclusives, I'm afraid you won't find them here. That's always been a rabbit hole that I've been too fearful to dive into. But first, let me give you a bit of a history of my own collecting. There were three distinct milestones in my collecting. In the fall of 1987, I drifted into a bookstore in the city that I was living at the time, London, Ontario, Canada. And in the back, I found this book called Barbie, Her Life and Times by Billy Boy. I think I might have heard of it prior to, as it had only recently been published. I didn't have a lot of money at the time, but I bought the book for what I recall was $35. I took it home, and for the next few weeks I pored over it. I loved what I was seeing. It kind of connected me to a nostalgic world of my childhood. I was born in 1961. I loved the wit, the humor, the glamour of the book, and throughout it I was enamored. Soon after, probably in about December of the same year, I decided I needed my very own Barbie. So I went out to one of the local department stores in the city at the time, which would have either been the Bay or Eaton. Sadly, neither are still in existence. And I picked up a Barbie, a modern Barbie, a superstar face Barbie. And she came with this odd attachment in her head, which allowed you to build the hair up in that very 80s way. And she wore a vinyl jumpsuit. Here she is. I'm surprised that somehow I still own her and that all the little accessories that came along with her. But as you can imagine, that one doll, that modern doll, was not going to suit what I was really looking for. No, I wanted one of those vintage dolls that I saw in the book. But where would you find them at that time? It was 1988. There was no online. There was no eBay. They were a decade away. I thought thrift stores would be a good place to start, and in the beginning I had some luck. I can remember going out to one of them and finding this vinyl yellow cape that I recall very well seeing in the Billy Boy book, and I thought at the time, this is going to be easy. Little did I know it wasn't. Doll shows? I'd never heard of them. There was a doll shop in the town, and the owner was a lovely woman, but she was more into antique dolls, and the thought of finding Barbies in antique shops proper never crossed my mind. In fact, most antiques were rarefied places that would never sell something as common in their view as Barbie dolls, something that at most would be 30 years old at the time. Hardly fine antiques. My next step in my journey as a collector was when a friend came into town. They loved to go to antique shops, and he knew I had an interest in Barbies. He said he'd been to one, merely a few blocks away from where I lived, that was actually selling an old Barbie. The next day I rushed down there, and to my surprise, in the glass display case was a ponytail Barbie with a whole wardrobe. At the time I had no reference books to let me know whether any of this clothing was original, but it didn't matter. I paid for the doll, and as I recall, it was $125, which to me at the time was a lot of money. I took the doll home and of course fell madly in love with it. Well, okay, that may be a bit of an exaggeration. I really liked it. A few days later, I got a call from the antique shop owner telling me that they had a newspaper article about the doll. I went down and picked it up. The doll and the exquisitely handmade clothing had been prizes in a raffle for a social group called the IODE. IODE meant International Order of Daughters of the Empire, which was and perhaps still is a sort of social group of women who are monarchists. For years I kept the collection in a vintage suitcase, and I had it packed away, and it's only been recently that I've been able to pull these items out and put them on dolls and display them. And those are the 3 points in my evolution as a Barbie collector. From then on, I started hitting flea markets and thrift stores with some luck, But it wasn't until years later when I found vintage shows, eBay, and doll shows that I really started acquiring items. I didn't still have a lot of money throughout the 90s, but I got what I could through these sources. There were some online sellers with mailing lists. There was a woman in Canada named Jane who used to run a show called The Vinyl Princess, and I could pick up what I could. Eventually, though, I kind of lost touch with the collection and sold much of it around 2006. But I did keep that original doll, though. I sold some really nice items. But in about 2015, I decided my life was changing and I sold my house. In clearing out things, I found the remnants of my collection, things that I hadn't been able to sell, and I thought I really enjoyed this as a hobby and meeting people and just the thrill of the hunt. So I decided to reignite it and started collecting again. In the intervening 10 years, I've been able to acquire every outfit from 1959 to 1969 with one exception. And I'm still picking up some loose items such as pack items and little accessories. I've recently started buying things from 70 to 75, but a lot more select. Some of it I just don't like. Although I have to say I do love the Ken outfits from the early 70s. Very ugly, but really of their time. I've seen the hobby evolve as well. I've seen prices go up and prices come down, but they now seem to be much more stable. One thing that is really missing now, though, are reference books. Collector Books out of Paducah, Kentucky used to produce collector's books on hundreds of subjects. I'm sure the distribution of each volume wasn't great, but it was enough to keep them in business. They produced some fabulous books, such as the Barbie Encyclopedia, the two Sarah Sink Eames books that detailed clothing from 1959 to 1975, as well as a myriad of other collector books. And of course, this doesn't mention the bi-monthly publication of Barbie Bazaar or the quarterly publication of Miller's, period. Those were incredible resources. But with that publishing house going out of business around 2010, none of these books are in publication. And of course, Miller's and Barbie Bazaar ceased operations in the early 2000s. Where can new collectors find out the details of an outfit? Without these books, I would have been lost, and I still treasure them and have a large collection. At some point, I'll make a video about all the books I have and what I think is essential. But what I'd like my videos to do is to review all the fashions, detail what they are, and be very scripted. My one parameter is that no video should be more than 15 minutes. Frankly, that's my limited attention span. I'll cover the Barbie fashions year by year. In some cases, like 1965, 68, 69, I'll have to split it into 2 videos. They just produce so much. But I hope you'll follow me in this as I share my passion for the hobby.